Hi, this is Victor Agreda Jr., and in this episode of Coders, we're going to be talking to Arthur Matosian, the founder and CEO of Pheebo, and talking about how he built his video app. But first, a message from our sponsors.
CommScope, thinking beyond today's technology to help you make the best decision for your network and your business. Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board, telecomcareers.com.
Hi, welcome to Coders, and thanks for joining us. I'm here with Arthur Matosian, and he founded Pheebo and has built this thing out. It's really cool. I'm actually going to let him explain what it is because I realized maybe people haven't used Pheebo before. So Arthur, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. How about you?
I'm good, man. So tell us, first of all, just tell us, what's the elevator pitch for Pheebo? What is it?
Well, I'll tell you how it started. I was on my iPad a couple years ago, and I was browsing reddit.com, and I was on the videos section. And what was happening was I was looking for something fun to watch. I didn't know what I wanted to see, and it would take me from YouTube, or from Safari and Reddit into the YouTube app. Then I'd have to quit YouTube when I was on the video, go back in Safari, then jump onto the website of like Vimeo or wherever the video was coming from. So I thought that there might be a better way to to basically discover and share video. So that's the gist of how it started. So what it is we curate channels from all over the web. So that includes YouTube, Vimeo, Reddit, Facebook, Vine, and any other sources that we find. And we put them in a really awesome animated way to help people discover great stuff to watch. And then we've got a bunch of tools built there to help you cut and clip certain clips or parts of video and then share online. And then the biggest piece that we're really excited about is a second screen display for the Apple TV. So if you have AirPlay mirroring is one thing, but if you turn on AirPlay is one thing, but if you have mirroring turned on, then you can have a really cool second screen display experience where your phone or your Apple Watch or your tablet become a remote, and you see a ton of animations happening on the TV, which is really really fun.
Yeah, I have to say that as a user of the app, I think it's beautifully done. It's beautifully designed. It gives you a real sense of where you are in the stream and whatnot. And I think it achieved the goal that you were going for, which is aggregate this stuff in a smart way and give people the ability to sort of curate their own video feed, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things that the biggest challenges out there for consumers is they don't realize, people think of Vice as this one channel, but Vice has Vice Munchies, Vice News. They've got a ton of stuff, or BuzzFeed, they have BuzzFeed Blue, Yellow. And so, or the last example, I guess, is Disney. Disney has over 20 channels available online, from Disney Insiders to Pixar to Disney Shorts. And there's not a really good way to do that without having to manually type and really dig in to look to find what you're looking for. So Pheebo takes that piece of the work out of it and just presents a ton of great stuff for you, in a really awesome and easy way. And I think as the months are coming and you'll see some of the updates we've put out there, it's going to be going to take the experience to a whole new level. So I'm excited.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about the building. This is Coders, so we talk about software, we talk about making stuff. I'm curious, in Scrum and in Agile development, right, you try to get to this minimum viable product, right? So how long did it take you to build that?
In our case, it took a little bit too long because, I was a bit of a perfectionist for this first go around. I knew what I wanted to do for a while, so this is something that, I shouldn't have taken as long as it did. In my opinion, we didn't get to an MVP till about 6 months in, and we didn't do any of the Scrum or any of the Agile stuff. I mean, we basically went from having 5 mock-ups basically drawn out to programming, and so what took a long time was, and what I would do differently is that we were, first of all, content was coming from YouTube, Vimeo, and all these other sources, but that really had nothing to do with getting the core MVP idea out. So I built all the APIs into the app first, and then we're trying to. I mean, it's hard to make things work with one provider, let alone multiple. So that was part of the delay. I mean, in the long run, obviously, it was a good decision, but it didn't have anything to do with getting something out there that quickly. Anyways, if I can go back, I would probably just stick with one of the providers and then test everything, etc., and then move on from there. So 6 months, and then we didn't ship till about I'd say 9 months for the first version.
How many? I was curious. You say about how many people did you have working on this?
There was 2 of my engineers. His name is Peter. He is an iOS engineer. He's been doing this for a while, And then myself, I did a little bit of, I review stuff like that. We use Parse as a backend. So, I would program in all the channels, do the kind of the dirty work, I would say, of programming, the not so fun kind of database things. We would, custom design every single logo that you see in the app. So that it's really, it keeps with the experience of being beautifully designed. So 2 people, and then, at various points, if we needed something extra done, I would either bring a friend on board or do a third-party contract. But for the most part, I would say 99% of this app is built by 2 guys.
That's pretty phenomenal, actually, I have to say. And it's one of the things that I think is really cool about the iOS platform in general is that you don't need a huge team to make something really great. And so that's cool. And to that end, what tools do you use? I mean, obviously Xcode, right?
Right.
And were you guys pure Objective-C, mostly Objective-C?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the client side was all Objective-C, and that's where Peter's incredible at. I have to give him a lot of credit for the work he did. The algorithms, the animations, the effects. I mean, there are many points throughout the process where some things didn't even, there are new. We're doing new things that hadn't been done before, so there was no kind of like a point of reference to start from. So, iOS for the client. We originally started with a company called StackMod, which got acquired by PayPal as a backend as a service. And we quickly switched to Parse. And I have to give a huge shout out to Facebook and the Parse team, because what they've done for developers to rapidly build an app and release it is really an incredible tool. If that didn't exist, our MVP product would have taken 50% more. I mean, they provide push notifications, account management. It just there's so much to it. So anybody who a piece of advice, if you're building an iOS or Android app, is even a JavaScript or web app, I would look at Parse as being your backend.
That's good. That's good to know, actually, because I think maybe a lot of people aren't as familiar with Parse as they probably should be.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, they got acquired by Facebook, and they've just kind of, the trend for them is going up, and there's tons of new tools that they recently announced, and I'm pretty excited about as well. And the other thing, so basically iOS, Xcode, Objective-C, and then we had Parse, and then a lot of, for the web piece, a lot of JavaScript, and then you're plugging in different APIs from Google or whoever it may be. So those are the core tenets, I'd say, of what went into building Pheebo.
And we're talking about the APIs. Like, how difficult was it to navigate through the different APIs? Were they vastly different, or I mean, it's kind of the same thing, right? It's video, so it's like I'm curious as to the implementation of each API. Were they just vastly different from each other, and you had a lot of learning to do on each one?
I mean, at the core, it was you're grabbing a stream and putting it on the app. So that piece was relatively straightforward. What was different? I mean, I guess the comparison between like Vimeo and YouTube. When you're YouTube, you can return 25 results at a time or whatever it was a couple years ago for a video, or Vimeo was maybe 15. So the way that the app would preload stuff, we couldn't get as far down the list with Vimeo as we could with YouTube. So there's like minor nuances to the different platforms. Pulling in the amount of views the video has, or the length of time the video is, were done in different ways. But again, all relatively straightforward, just slightly different implementations. And again, with that, some limits to one versus the other, depending on which API.
Right. And that's sort of an interesting thing too, because like I said, it's really a basic sort of thing, right? You've got the stream, you negotiate that, but then you've got metadata. And that always seems to be the sticking point, is this metadata, because everybody does metadata differently, or has some weird spin on it. And then of course you've got the calls, like you said, Vimeo, not as big a company as Google, obviously. So they're limiting it a bit more. And I assume that's just, on their end, an engineering decision to say, limit this somewhat. We don't have the server capacity that YouTube does, obviously. So that's cool. I mean, how long do you think it took to negotiate all of those APIs, to figure out and map those and integrate them?
Well, once we had the client piece built, that where everything was kind of feeding into the iOS piece, I would say no more than a week, or 2 each. I mean, again, that's like getting the minimum kind of piece down. Like to your point, Vimeo isn't as big of a company, so I think there were a few limitations on their end, but they've steadily made changes. And as you're seeing, sometimes the changes they make are better and more open. In other cases, with other companies, sometimes like Twitter lately, the changes sometimes tend to roll back access. So you're constantly navigating the different the limits, and you have to find creative solutions. Or in certain cases, we had a Facebook channel, for example, where it would go and pull in your Facebook feed and parse out every post that wasn't a video. So whether you uploaded a video or your friends shared a link from Vimeo, YouTube, etc., and it created this really awesome feed of just basically a Facebook video channel that was I was really excited about and really awesome. But they made some changes at F8, which are understandable, why they made the changes, and we're no longer able to do that. No, I mean, not just us, nobody is able to do it. So, that's a case of kind of go from a developer's perspective, going a step back. But again, with a platform like that, you have to understand why, and it's no big deal. But it was a bummer to have to take that out.
Right. Yeah. And I can only imagine that's definitely something that you can't just ship a product and forget about it. Never mind the support and all these other things, but you have to negotiate the API changes, from hosts. So you're just having to keep up with that, alone. And especially when you build something like that and it's so cool and you're like, oh man,
Definitely. I wouldn't even say it's negotiation, more like click I accept to whatever they say.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's definitely true. So, do you have any tips? Given this experience, do you have any advice for small shops, one or two people or individuals making stuff? Like, what were some of the things that you learned in building Pheebo?
Yeah, I learned you can talk about a component you're trying to build, a feature or an idea or an animation for an hour or two. You could even spend time mocking that up or trying to animate it on, with an Adobe product or whatever on your computer, or you could just build it. Many times we would just discuss something, and it was by the time we were done talking about it, if we had just focused that 1, 2, 3 hours and actually doing it, it would have been done. Whether it got used or not ultimately is a different question. But kind of the Nike slogan or the new Shia LaBeouf video, just do it. So literally, I would say, I mean, we threw away, or I wouldn't say throw away, we didn't use maybe 15-20% of the overall code that we wrote. But there was time spent learning, trying new things, kind of pushing the boundaries. There's a lot of stuff, especially if you think about the APIs that are available on iOS 2 or 3 years ago versus today. There's much more tools. There's many more tools for us today than there were. So we had to kind of find creative solutions to do what we were doing then. Just iterate. But I believe very strongly in iterating with code. Again, I understand you have to have a plan, you have to design and have mockups, etc. But iterating with code sometimes is a lot more faster and efficient, and you'd be surprised at the results.
Well, yeah, you had mentioned that you guys didn't necessarily use Scrum, but obviously Scrum was developed organically because the creator was looking at how people really worked, and waterfall is so opposite of how human beings really do. What you're really talking about is basically Scrum. It's just without the formality of, well, let's do the check. I mean, you're checking in, you're doing your code, you're doing all this other stuff all at the same time. So you were doing agile development. You just weren't doing the sort of rigor, applied to it or whatever. It's the same thing. And I find that interesting that, that again is like the power of the tools that we have now, that you can actually go in and as you're talking about something, go ahead and poke away at it. And next thing you know, by the end of your conversation, like, oh, check it out. Here's that animation we were just talking about. Here's how it works. Boom.
Right. Yeah, it's exciting. The process is, I'm sure for anybody who's developed an app or is in development, you're surprised, after a couple of weeks to see something take shape, even though it's not done. It's a really empowering feeling, and it kind of gets the juices flowing quite a bit. So,
now is your guy local or is he remote?
Yeah, no, he's here in San Diego.
Okay.
I'm in Los Angeles. He's in San Diego currently, so
okay,
not too far.
Did you guys meet in person, or did you do FaceTime or?
I mean, for a majority of the work was over Skype, phone, text, email. But we have met in person several times. Obviously, it's funny. The times that we've met in person, it's an incredible collaboration experience. I mean, you just get a lot more done. It's really difficult to kind of articulate an idea through the phone or through Skype. So it kind of, I have to say, over the years of working with him, it improved at least my communication skills. I'm definitely a lot. It was a little bit hard at first. Doing things like holding your phone up to a screen, etc. Yeah. I mean, you can't beat in-person collaboration, but I'm really proud and impressed that we did a lot of what we did remotely. It definitely made conversations a bit longer than they needed to be, and it definitely left a little bit of room for interpretation. But I think that you become friends that way, and you kind of learn how to people with different communication styles, and we made it work. I mean, in the modern world, I mean, obviously, kind of you have to rely on products like Skype or FaceTime to get things done. So, and there's other tools. Now, especially QuickTime has made it easy to share your screen while you're on your computer. So I've done that, which has helped a lot. That wasn't available back then. So, do whatever way you gotta get it done. I mean, you got to do it. So,
right now, As someone who managed a remote team, I can definitely feel your pain on that because we used IRC actually.
Oh wow, old
Yeah,
school.
and well, and the cool thing about IRC is that when you're doing media, when you're doing content, the generic content thing, uh, we built bots, so we were able to do things like check tags, check spellings, check format, and that sort of thing. And you could probably do that with code as well, right? You say, okay, here's this, and then go through and check. But you've got GitHub and all kinds of other things where you can do this stuff now. It's beautiful. Uh, I'm curious though. Have you used Slack?
I've heard of Slack. Obviously, I've read about it online, and I have. No, I can't say I have. I'd like to try it one day.
Did you
Maybe
use
maybe after this call, I will. But
Did you use Campfire? You ever use Campfire?
I have used Campfire. For Pheebo, we didn't use it though. We just were strictly old school email, phone calls,
Yeah, right
Skype.
on.
We Testflight was a huge tool that we used to send builds back and forth, and yeah, they were fantastic for that. So
Yeah, and for those who don't know, TestFlight actually was an LA company, or based in LA, and they were acquired by Apple like about a year ago, I think, right?
I think right around the last WWDC. So just
Yeah,
about
yeah, and it provides a way for developers to give people beta access and then easily manage that whole thing, because normally like the old provision process, all these sorts of things was a real nightmare. Test Flight's sort of like an app. You click some buttons and boom, you've got the app downloading, and it's a beta, and you can test it. And of course, Apple's integration, from what I've seen, has been really fantastic. I mean, the Test Flight was a great product to begin with, but now that they've acquired them, it's like, this is magnificent.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten much easier. The whole kind of awkward period of the integration has changed, and so yeah, it's really. I mean, it's nice to talk about an idea, for example, spend a day or two implementing a bug fix or a new feature, and then kind of get a push notification saying, "Oh, your app is available for download from TestFlight," and then do a quick little download through their app, and it's working right there. And from what I understand now as well, once you're actually when you're beta testing or QA testing, and you want to get to a build that you like, you can just push a button from TestFlight and then use that build to submit to iTunes for approval. So they really streamlined the whole. I mean, like I said, it was great before. It's far better now, and I'm really thrilled that Apple bought them. Congrats to that team, obviously, and I think that it's definitely made life a lot easier for tons of developers. So
Absolutely. Now, you had said back then we didn't have this, and this. So how long has Pheebo been around?
um, we started the initial. Okay, so the Pheebo came out May 1st, 2013. So we were developing that. Let's see, the summer of 2012 was when we actually started the coding. The actual idea for it and designs were around sometime around, I would say, early 2012. So yeah, from summer 2012 till about May 2013 was the initial development cycle or process. And then since then, this is not the typical startup story. I would say we've taken a lot of time. We've gone really slow because the video space, is heating up. We're kind of taking a good view of the market, trying to stay alive to kind of get to the point where video really was going to be the thing. I thought that we were a bit early with lots of things like the AirPlay mirroring stuff. We were I think one of the first, if not the first, to do that with video, anyways. And so yeah, we had a. I mean, we're still kind of in that phase now. So I'd say the 2.0 version that's coming out fairly soon is going to be the one that we really push, and hopefully get some decent press, etc. with. But the last 2 years have been staying alive, learning, and iterating, because it's a fairly ambitious product that wasn't something we could have done in 90 days and ship and kind of have some of these awesome success stories you hear about.
Yeah, well, I think though some of that is, if you look statistically speaking, some of those success stories are, if not apocryphal, they're just rarities, right? I mean, you remember Trism, right? That was one of the big breakout hits in like early iOS App Store days, and what happened to that studio, right? They're not a Zynga, they're not whatever, and it's like, okay, you had this one sort of oddball. It took, I mean, hell, a great example is Flappy Bird, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's it's under designed. It's terrible mechanic, really. Just oddly addictive, like Cookie Clicker or something weird like that. It's just a bizarre sort of thing. Of course, it took off because PewDiePie played it, and
Right.
he got this huge follow on from that. So I I totally understand the whole thing of like where you are in this space that is just exploding, right? And you guys are very passionate about your product and you're very detail oriented. So you want to keep pace, but you also want to make sure that you're providing the best value to your customers, right? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. Although this is a free app, right?
Yeah, it's totally free, and we hope to keep it that way. So.
Cool. Well, and I had a question about.
Actually, I actually
Go
want
ahead.
to say to onto your point. A recent example is Meerkat. People saw this meteoric rise of this brand new app, Meerkat, and like came from nowhere essentially. And was the core of that app, I think, was built in about 8 weeks. But what people forget is that the founder of Meerkat and that company, that all of that backend, all that stuff was another product they had been iterating on for a couple years. And I forget the name, but I'm sure if you look up on the App Store, they have their other app that's still there, like on air or whatever it was. But it was a live streaming thing. It was very, very similar, but they rebranded and did a couple changes, simplified the experience, and then you saw that. So it's like the overnight success that was 3 years in the making kind of situation. So
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's a big part of it, right? People talk about the preparation aspect of it. It's
right,
99% whatever and all this. It's funny because I was on a podcast actually before this show, and we were talking about that, how do you go to market and how do you get successful and how do you, promote your app and just the sort of weird lightning rod effect that sometimes happens for some of these apps. And people think, oh, this just popped up, but really it's been around, or the team has been around. In fact, I was talking about Twitch and how Twitch was originally just in TV, and it did okay for a little while, and then it just kind of bottomed out, and then they pivoted to Twitch. And so the idea is you've got to be agile, you've got to be nimble, and be able to say, okay, if this isn't working, maybe turn it around just a little bit, and we can go into this other area. You're not going to get into live streaming.
uh, I can't say we're not getting to live streaming. I mean, that's definitely part of the plan. It's hard to stay focused right now. We're focused on 2.0 and what that is. Kind of taking all these tools we're creating and making. I learned at Facebook's. They have a startup. It's called FB Start, and
Yeah.
I learned that they 90% of the people that I guess on platforms consume, 9% curate, and then 1% create. So we built Pheebo. The initial idea was that the first set of the app was going to be for the 90%. Now we're getting into that 1% or the other 9% where the curators, you curate your content, videos, etc. And then the next phase for us would be, getting into the full 100% is that the creators piece. And we've definitely got a couple ideas, one related to VR and cardboard as far as live streaming is concerned. So you can kind of watch content at the same time with people, or just also live streaming your own content. But that space, again, I take, I guess you could say the Apple approach is let the market kind of develop, see what happens, and then see where you can do something different and better and where you'd fit. And what makes sense for what we're doing. But live streaming is something that I definitely have an interest in.
That's cool. I had a question about, what do you use for providing video or whatever, and I realize now that's kind of a dumb question because you're not hosting anything. You're hosted on the App Store, and then you're pulling in video from these other sources. But is there anything else that you guys are using in terms of the sort of middleware?
Yeah, so I mean, most of the content currently comes from third-party providers. Part of the live streaming, or even just streaming from our end, would be our own providing or service provider service,
Hmm.
data provider, whatever you want to call that. We've looked. Amazon Cloud is one of the pieces that we probably build on for that, where we can kind of users can upload a video directly, host it there, then stream it instead of having their own Pheebo channel instead of it be YouTube or Vimeo or whatever. Parse has some hosting now, which is we'll see how that works out. So again, it's kind of like seeing these tools that are picking the best tool for the job at that time. Media Temple's an LA-based provider. We do host certain bits of content that come from, that's ours that come from other sources, but the videos for being a lightweight startup, obviously the bandwidth is incredibly expensive for videos. So it's been a conscious choice to pull from other sources at this point in time until we have the proper funding and traction. Know what we're doing, because we could blow a ton of money doing that and it'd be totally useless. So it's trying to be real. Innovation. You don't need a lot of money to be innovative. You just need to be creative.
Right.
So yeah. Yeah.
Well, a couple more questions. First of all, one I didn't prep you for, so I'm sorry about this, but I was curious what your thoughts are. You'd mentioned bandwidth though, and I'm curious because RCR Wireless does cover telecom and the wireless spectrum, right? And in this country in particular, we have bandwidth caps, we have or data limits and all these other things. Do you guys worry about that? I mean, in terms of from a content ingestion side, you want
Yeah.
your consumers to get the stuff. Do you worry about that?
Absolutely. That was, and from the very first version of Pheebo, we actually had the app. It detects if you're on Wi-Fi or a third-party LG. So not third-party LG or 3G. So if you're on LG or was it? I was saying LG. Excuse me.
LTE?
LTE. I'm sorry. It's early in the morning for me over here. I know you guys are on
Yeah,
the
I
East
know.
Coast. I'm never up at this time. So if you're on LTE, for example, or 3G, the app does not do all the animations that you see. It doesn't download the videos and create that whole matrix effect because that would totally destroy your bandwidth. What it does instead, which is an equally beautiful experience, is it does animation of the thumbnail images of the video. So if you have whatever that YouTube or Vimeo thumbnail images, they cycle in and out in a really beautiful animated way. So you're just downloading the little picture, not the entire video. And then if you switch to Wi-Fi, then you see the same thing happen with the logos flip, but instead of flipping to a thumbnail animation, it flips to the actual video streaming. Just like where that came from actually is that scene in the Matrix when Neo talks to the architect and the videos are all kind of going on behind you. I saw that in the movie when I was when I was young, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. So I thought that'd be a good point of reference to start for a new user interface for video. Anyways, the app detects if you're on Wi-Fi or LTE, not LG, and it does that. And then also there's other things where it's fairly standard. If you're on Wi-Fi, it'll take a HD stream versus if you're on cellular data, it'll just pull in the lower resolution. So those are a couple things that we do to help protect users.
Does YouTube and Vimeo have that in their API also, where it's saying, okay, feed me the low bandwidth?
At the time, I don't think they had that, and actually, I have to go back and look. I think that we manually select that in ours. If they provide it now, we didn't implement it the way they have it. I have to. That's a detail I don't know off the top of my head. I don't think that they did that at the time. That was us having to make that choice.
Yeah.
And kind of find that. I mean, they have like the multiple streams, and you got to, I guess,
Sure.
pick the stream you want, but you have to do the whole detection of what you want to display and when.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. So one more question. I was curious, you're a small team and you're building and you're shipping. And so that's in itself a whole thing. How do you guys do, first of all, what do you use for bug tracking? And then how do you do support?
So bug tracking, I can't say we do anything too fancy. I mean, basically, it's screenshots of the app, whatever something's going wrong, or take a QuickTime video, or grab another cell phone and take a video of the problem, try to replicate the bug. It's a small team of that as well. One of our investors, his son has joined the team as a QA engineer, which has been incredibly helpful. Actually, it has somebody another set of eyes kind of beat down and find issues. With TestFlight, we'll get the app out there to friends and family and anybody who we've talked to online or in person that wants to test it out, and just basically get people's. A lot of times you get a lot of opinions more so than QA. QA is a very specific thing that you have to really be looking for, and it's hard to separate the what this should be or could be versus here we're trying to fix this issue. But a lot of it's just nitty gritty screenshots and videos, and then replicating that and fixing it. And the other part, as far as your question, sorry.
For support, how do you guys handle support?
I get emails actually from people, which is really cool. So we have inside the app, there's send us an email or whatever. And I've gotten some really cool stuff. One time the app stopped working, some API change, and you don't realize because you see the every day the stats and these numbers, and it's kind of like it become desensitized to that.
Sure.
When your app doesn't work, and then someone's like, "Hey, I rely on this to watch video, or whatever," you kind of start to see, "Wow, people really do care." So we get emails that way. Obviously, the App Store reviews, which thankfully we've had some really good reviews on the App Store. You get feedback there, and you're constantly just showing the product to people and getting feedback that way.
And okay, actually, one last question because we've got WWDC coming up. And so I'm curious, I saw the other day that the Apple TV well, first of all, there's the rumor that, there will be no new Apple TV at WW, but the fact that Apple TV can be a HomeKit hub, which I thought was pretty cool. But I think we heard that a while back too. Right. So there's obviously got to be a lot of HomeKit stuff, I believe. So anything else you think that's going to come out Monday?
Well, with respect to the Apple TV piece, I'm actually, if the rumors are true that they're delaying that, I'm happy. I'm excited for that piece, but I'm happy because we're also not ready for the Apple TV revolution. not yet. I think that a little more time from whatever they're doing, who knows? I'm sure it's going to be fantastic, and for us as well. Because Pheebo has from day one been positioned to be a third-party app on Apple TV. That's the whole reason why we have the mirroring and all that. So I'm incredibly excited about what we're doing in that space. And one of the first, and really think it's really innovative. So yeah, I'm glad that there's a little bit more time to make it perfect for both sides. As far as this Monday, again, looking at what it sounded like there was going to be a ton of stuff, Apple TV, iOS 9, whatever they do with OS 10. And I think now, given what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling, is it's going to all be about the watch. I mean, you've got this new thing that's out there, and what does it need more than anything right now is really great apps. So I hope that they focus on the watch, and obviously, what they're going to do with iOS, and whatever else will be a nice little bonus. But I think it's going to be all about the watch. So
yeah, the native, because right now the apps are not really native apps, right? They're more, it's more like a second screen thing. They don't really.
Right. I mean,
it's kind of hard to explain that, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you need a complementary iOS app to go along with it, and it's fairly limited what you can do. So especially in our case, we're trying to use it as a second screen, as a remote from your watch, and so cool. I'm hoping they make that a little more robust, and I imagine they will. I mean, I think they get it now. Developers.
Yeah, well, and it tracks really well with what happened with the iPhone launch, right? Because you didn't have an app store at first. I mean, this, at least they have an app store, because they wouldn't have released it without an app component at this stage of the game, right? That would have been silly. But the potential for the app store was there. Obviously, I mean, people like who worked with me, Erica Sadoun, were jailbreaking, and they were going in and writing their own apps and whatnot.
She wrote the book on that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just cool to see, because people like us who know Apple, we know that they are casting the line way out there, and then they pull it tight and they kind of reel it in. And that's where all the iterations and refinements come in. Is like, okay, we're going to do this thing. It's going to be out there. It's not going to be the best thing that developers are going to experience, but the people who are dedicated and love it are going to make these awesome things. And then as we improve that, it's just going to get better and better and better. I mean, look at iOS 1 versus today. It's phenomenal the amount of tools that we have been added since then.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you look at the first apps that were legit from Apple, they were web apps through Safari. There was an app for pilots, which was I'm forgetting the name right now, but it was a really, really good app. ForeFlight, that was web based, and they converted to an iOS app, and they're one of the top apps now. So there's I think that we're obviously, like you said, in this stage of the game, they're starting a little bit further along. But I'm pretty excited with what they do, and it'll be.
Oh yeah. It's cool hardware. I went by the Apple store the other day and showed my kids about Force Touch. And I was explaining, like, it's not really, pushing down, but it feels like it is. It's like that. How cool is that, right?
Yeah. The cool thing for me, actually, I called my dad from the watch itself, which was really nice. And the other time I was doing dishes and my hands weren't like clean, and I couldn't get my phone in my pocket. So I just tapped the button and I was able to take a call on the wrist. So that, was been like the futuristic, fun little feature that I've most enjoyed. And the second thing I have to say is, if you have an Apple TV, using this as a remote is really cool. Just kind of lounge back, and so that was fun. And there's a bunch of stuff that I like, but those are the two things that I like the most about the watches.
Well, and especially if you're like me and you have a couch, you're constantly losing the damn Apple remote for the Apple TV. So.
Right.
All right. Well, Arthur, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
And everyone can check out your app, of course, on the App Store as Pheebo.
Yes, it's spelled Pheebo, like
That's
Pheebo
right.
from Friends.
Oh, there we go.
Yep.
And of course, to everyone who's watching out there, I'm going to be at the Worldwide Developers Conference, Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, next week in San Francisco. And so on Friday, I'll have some conversations with developers. We'll talk about what happened on Monday, and it'll be super fun. Really looking forward to all the great stuff that Apple's going to be talking about. So for this week's episode of Coders, I am Victor Agreda Jr., and thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Coders is a production of RCR TV News. To reach Victor Agreda Jr. or to suggest a show topic for Coders, you can reach him on Twitter @Superpixels. For all the latest news on wireless code and the whole world of wireless, check out rcrwireless.com.